It was November the 11th, 2012. I was watching the coverage of Remembrance Sunday on television, as I do most years, when I suddenly thought, why on the day when we were remembering those that fought for our freedom, were there not more Muslims in attendance? The lack of Muslims honouring the war dead mystified me. It seemed wrong. I wanted to find out more. Surely we have a duty to raise awareness of the vital role that Muslims played in these two major points in history. And that is what this film is all about. Commemorating the positive contribution of Muslim soldiers who fought alongside British troops in World War I and II. Forgotten Soldiers will give people the chance to be educated and inspired through the lesser known narratives lost by the conflicts, so we can combat alienation, encourage citizenship, and foster a greater sense of belonging. We also want to inspire the historian in you, so we want you to go away feeling proud and excited about history, to find out more about this subject and look deeper into other cultures, faiths and communities that came together during that time of fear and uncertainty for a common cause. We hope that we can create an atmosphere of unity and challenge the negative stereotypes associated with Muslims in the media today. It is time to remember Britain's forgotten soldiers. The vital role that Muslims as soldiers played in the British war effort, especially during the World Wars, is an important aspect of history that can be easily forgotten. However, this is a crucial link in history that can increase the pride in personal and cultural identity among Muslim youth of today. All the time in the media, all we hear at this moment in time is negativity, anger, oppression, and especially around Islam. So this project will look to kind of take away that negative narrative and focus a lot on the positive things that Muslims did in the war.
We as young Muslims especially should know what role we played in making, like I said, what Britain is today, because we get, being in this country with Islam, with the media showing Islam the image that they want to show. Muslims, we should know that, the people should know that we also helped making what this country is today.
Due to ignorance on both sides, we have narrow-minded views and we have ill-informed views is a better word to use. So to remove those ill-informed views, what we need to do is learn about a common history and a common war that we shared together, that we fought together, we sat together, we ate together against this evil ideology.
During the First World War, nearly 400,000 Muslim soldiers fought for Britain. They were part of British Indian Army, or what was then undivided India. These Muslim soldiers made up 1/3 of the British Indian Army at the time, so of the 1.5 million strong army population, 400,000 of them were Muslim. Muslim soldiers also had a vital role to play in establishing peace and unity during the Second World War. Fighting and dying alongside British troops, it is worthwhile to note that, unlike in other countries where soldiers were conscripted, the Indian Army was the largest army of volunteers to fight in both world wars. This makes the contribution of Muslim soldiers in both these world wars even more profound and meaningful.
The numbers that actually contributed, that mass amount, actually was a significant strategic, reason for the success of the World War Coalition.
Sometimes people have said over the last few years it's about democracy and our sovereignty. Serving soldiers, and in particular those who have given their lives for this country, from overseas, from Commonwealth countries and from Asian countries, have made us what we are, made Great Britain great.
I think it is important, as as a child myself, in schools we didn't get taught regarding Muslims playing a role in World War I or World War II, but if if I did know back then, I would feel more British, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you know, we had a role in making Britain what it is today.
Our young people don't recognise that we have a bond with Britain and the empire from many years ago. So I think, you know, that needs to be recognised. Our young people need to know about that and need to feel proud of that. And, you know, I think that'd be great for cohesion and bringing communities together, and it's a shared history.
In the First World War, India donated £479 million to Britain's war. It wasn't India's war. And in the Second World War, it was well over £1.5 billion.
There's amazing stories that I can go on about this. There's stories of like 15-year-old boys getting recruited to fight in the war, dying in Italy. So, you know, the sacrifices that were made by young Muslim soldiers is amazing. In the First World War, casualties among the British Indian Army were 89,000, with the injured being close to 50,000, of which Muslims accounted for 1/3. While their bodies have never been recovered, their names have been engraved on the Menin Gate Memorial, a memorial to the missing in Ypres, Belgium. Here you will find the names of Commonwealth as well as British soldiers who were missing or dead during the Ypres salient war of World War I. Muslim soldiers who died in Brighton were buried in military cemetery and their names engraved there. Muslim soldiers served in both the world wars in countries other than Britain.
You know, millions of them were slaughtered. They've never been mentioned in history because they've just been wiped off. So these are the double standards, I'm sad to say, you know, have been going on for a long time. And these are the things that the new generation is looking at and going back in history.
You just feel that, you know, we're the next generation living in UK, that enough's not been done. In my school, in my college, I didn't know nothing about Muslim contribution to World War II. I'd love for, you know, my children and the future generations to come to know about their history and how close bond we had with the British Empire, and we are the, you know, the children of our, you know, grandfathers and things like that, and they contribute to the freedoms of England.
This is Brighton Pavilion, one of the town's most iconic buildings. During the First World War, the pavilion, along with other sites in Brighton, was transformed into a military hospital. From December 1914 to January 1916, sick and wounded soldiers from the Indian Army were treated in the former palace. The Pavilion Hospital was set up with 2 operating theatres and over 720 beds. Over 2,300 men were treated at the hospital, and elaborate arrangements were made to cater for the patients' religious and cultural needs. 9 different kitchens were set up in the grounds of the hospital so that food could be cooked by the soldiers' fellow caste members and co-religionists. Muslims were given a space on the eastern lawn to pray facing towards Mecca, while Sikhs were provided for with a tented Gurdwara in the grounds. The pavilion was partly used in imperial efforts to convince potential Indian recruits that their wounded countrymen were being well treated. A series of photographs were produced with the official sanction of the state, showing the resplendent rooms converted into hospital wards. Few pictures were taken of the local workhouse, renamed the Kitchener Indian Hospital, now Brighton General Hospital, which housed the majority of wounded troops. The soldiers also received visits from Lord Kitchener in July 1915 and George V in August of the same year, who presented several soldiers with military honours. One of the most important parts of our research was to gauge the opinion of religious leaders and to try to explore reasons why it may be important for us to raise awareness of the Muslim contribution to the war effort. Imam Irfan Chishti is the congregation leader for Manchester Central Mosque and was kind enough to share his thoughts with us.
Good cohesion can only occur when you've got that acknowledgement of the past in order to then make the current generations. I get really upset when I see young people say, as I do in my work, unfortunately again, I don't feel British, I don't feel part of this nation, I don't feel I can belong. Yes, we've got racism, yes, we've got issues around the far right, yes, we've got all of these inequalities, we know that those issues exist, and yes, you know, young British Muslims will feel alienated, there's Islamophobia, all of those issues are there. But I think that this kind of project, and I wish you all the success that it gets out more and more, is really crucial in trying to redress some of those insecurities that these young British Muslims have, both male and female.
Knowledge is a power. So knowing where you come from, knowing your history is a power.
You know, if I didn't know what role my granddad has sacrificed his life for this country, and tomorrow when someone turns around and gives me racism or many other people racism, it makes me feel so belittled and upset and saddened to think that actually my grandfather played a part in this country and I have every right to be here. So when someone targets me and gives me racism, it's out of order. No one can stand there and say, go back to the country that you've come from. What country? This is our country, this is our home, and our grandparents and our elders have played their part to make this country great.
My grandfather was part of World War II. It is him who inspired this film. Muhammad Sadiq Malik, a soldier who served as part of the British Indian Army in Burma in 1944, and a Muslim hero that has lived in Manchester most of his life. I went to see him to capture some of his thoughts.
My name is Muhammad Sadiq. People called me Malik. So I was born in 1927, 25th November of 27. And I joined the army in 1943.
But I would say that you're a hero of the British Army. Would you consider yourself a hero?
No, I don't. I was just serving the country of being loyal to the country and to our army.
One of the things that we were talking about was pride as well, how important it is to feel proud, to feel British, to be British. I remember having a conversation with my grandfather and he was saying to me, I go, do you feel proud to be British? And he said, yes, of course, I am British. I fought in the war. I was in Burma in 1944. You know, and these stories are important because it made me feel that I belonged as well. You know, the role that my grandfather played has had a significant impact on my life.
In my opinion is, you have to be obedient where you live, where you eat and everything, earn everything. I got my British nationality now, so I should be obedient to the British Empire, to the British country. I mean, I always think about the best of the British country because I'm British now.
A statue of World War II female soldier and Special Forces operative Noor Inayat Khan has recently been unveiled. It is of great interest because I think it's really amazing that a female soldier from World War II is commemorated like this. It shows that the British government does actually appreciate the role of Muslims in the wars.
Here we are in Gordon Square, one of Bloomsbury Gardens in London. Now, this garden has a big significance to Noor Inayat Khan. One of the main reasons is because she lived not too far away from here. And secondly, because her father, Inayat Khan, was known to have visited these gardens to meditate under a cherry tree.
A fluent French speaker, Miss Khan joined Britain's sabotage force, the SOE, and became the first female radio operator sent into France in 1943 with the famous instruction to set Europe ablaze. The role was so dangerous that she arrived in Paris with the life expectancy of just 6 weeks. In October 1943, Miss Khan was betrayed and was arrested by the Gestapo. Despite repeated torture, she refused to reveal any information showing her bravery and courage as an exceptional Muslim hero. On September 13, 1944, Miss Khan and 3 other female SOE agents were transferred to Dachau concentration camp where they were shot.
My mum always says to me that her and her sisters were so privileged being in the army and that their granddad never stopped any of them. It was like women could play their part. You have your faith, yes, you have your Islamic faith and your Muslim religion, but you are not bound by that. You are representing a country, you are supporting that country, and that is really, really important. And we're proud to be British, we're proud to be Pakistani, proud to be Kashmiri, and proud to be Muslim.
Women were employed to do a number of jobs to assist the armies in order for them to carry out their tasks. So it wouldn't have happened without the involvement of women, and that's a very important aspect that often isn't factored in to the military contribution. Often we just focus entirely on the men. Even in the First World War for British soldiers, there were many mothers, sisters, wives who were working in the arms industry, making shells and bombs and so forth, and their jobs were highly important to ensure that the war effort continued, because without them we wouldn't have had the ammunition that we needed, and the war could have come to a standstill quite early on.
A soldier who fought valiantly and showed bravery should be a role model that young Muslims should look up to. One of these role models is Sepoy soldier Khudadad Khan. He was born on 20th of October 1888 in the Chakwal district in present-day Punjab. His parents were of Punjabi descent. Khan served the British forces in the First World War when he was part of the 129th Balochi Regiment. He has the honour of being the first Indian soldier to receive the Victoria Cross in October of 1914. He was among the 20,000 troops that were sent to the front lines to help the exhausted British troops. It was in 1914 that the Germans launched a massive offensive to capture the ports, so that the supply lines of the British forces were not only monitored, but vital points were also captured. On the 31st of October, the first and last encounter between the two forces was at Hollybeck village in Belgium, where Balochis fought bravely. It was only Khan's crew, as well as the machine guns, that continued fighting till the end. Though the Balochis fought bravely, they ultimately lost the battle due to heavy casualties. Though the conditions were devastating for the Balochis, Khan's crew managed to ensure that the work continued and the enemy was engaged as much as possible. They not only held their positions, but also caused heavy losses to the enemy forces amid strong German offensive. Khan's portrait still hangs at the National Army Museum. His Victoria Cross is at display at his ancestral home in Chakwal.
You know, we hear some circles in our society today that say, you know, get rid of all these Muslims, we don't want them, we want to bring our country back. All that rhetoric we hear from the far right. And I remember him, David's called, he said, you know what these guys need to realise is actually if it wasn't for the Muslim contribution in World War I, we wouldn't have succeeded. So actually, this nation, England, United Kingdom, as a nation, we owe those Muslim soldiers, those shuhada, I have to say, that gave their life, to actually preserve and give this nation the greatness that it now has.
These days people think, oh, the war's got nothing to do with this, the British Army's got nothing to do with this. Well, actually, our ancestors have fought in the British Army and stood by and supported it. I mean, when I now see history and I see images and pictures of, you know, King George V wearing a turban, and I've been told that where he wore it with the pointed part was the turban of the Muslim officers and Muslim soldiers, it gives me so much pride. You know, King George V, that wasn't in my history as a child growing up. You know, I know about Henry VII and his 5 wives, 6, 7 wives, whatever, but this was really, really important. If I'd known that, it would have made me feel more inclined to be a part of this great nation.
Another example is my first experience of Muslims that gave up their life during the Second World War was a visit I made to Woking, which was Brookwood Cemetery, which is the oldest cemetery of that time. And I came across a grave which had a Malay name. It was a gentleman from Malaysia. He was a Muslim, and it's in Lahore, India, that he actually died and he was brought back to be buried in Brookwood. So there's a number of graves of fellow Muslims that sacrificed their life, that fought during the First and the Second World War.
Well, we're sat here to honour and to remember the dead. And that's an inherent part of our Islamic faith. You know, in our prayers every single day we are praying upon those and remembering those that have died.
Woking's Muslim burial ground is a reminder of the significant contribution made by some 3 million Indian service personnel who fought alongside the Allied troops during the World Wars. It was built during the First World War as the only designated place of burial for Muslim soldiers who had died at the temporary Indian Army Hospital in Brighton Pavilion and elsewhere along the south coast. There were rumours that Muslim soldiers were not receiving burial according to their religious customs. However, these were dispelled once the War Office commissioned a special burial ground at Woking, chosen for its close proximity to Britain's only purpose-built mosque at the time. The site was completed in 1917, with 19 bodies being received from Brighton during the First World War, but a total of 27 with subsequent burials from the Second World War.
In schools as well nowadays, they don't really teach, you know, the students who fought in the war exactly, like, you know, if it was Muslims, Jewish people, Christians. So this really tells you, you know, like the memorial there, the names, it tells us exactly who's fought and the names exactly and what their positions were.
If anyone's if anyone came to visit here, no matter what culture they are, what background they have, they need to realise that this place is important, and then it should be more well known to other people, that people should visit this place, because it's just looking back at the past and realising that before there was like this one community where everyone just got together, including Muslim soldiers, that should be more acknowledged than they are right now.
You know, the story of Muslim soldiers and the role that they played is one of the least known narratives, of the wars, and it's a massive part that they played. The Muslim Punjab army were known as the backbone of the British Army. You know, it's essential that we kind of get this story out. To find out more about Muslim war soldiers and to see if they were being acknowledged, I decided to find out more information on the subject. I took a small group of volunteers with me, and while in Paris we visited Normandy, where there are many historical memorial grave sites. However, in Normandy we were to come across some bad news. Okay, so we're at the Normandy American Cemetery, and we actually went inside to speak to people on the information desk. What information he told me was that the Muslim cemetery is actually at another location from here. So I asked her how far, and she goes, it's about 2.5 hours away. We were all disheartened on hearing the news. However, we didn't give up, and soon travelled to Bayeux Cemetery, where we went on hunt to find Muslim graves.
So, I'm really kind of over the moon at the moment, because I knew there would be something for us to find and look for today. I mean, we went to the American cemetery, and we were told that there's no Muslim graves here, there's no Muslim soldiers that fought here, and all this kind of stuff. They didn't know anything about, especially at the information desk, about anything about Muslim soldiers fighting in World War I or II.
It was really, I think it was really a shock for me to discover that even if you are taught the history, there's a part of it that is hidden. And as someone, like many French, I come from, my grandparents were immigrants. So it was really strong to discover that a very important part of our history as descendants of immigrants is hidden.
The conclusion to the Paris trip. The journey was a sombre one, so different to the one we made 4 days earlier from Manchester that was full of excitement and adventure. Nothing much was said on the way back, but we all knew what the other was feeling. I think that day was the most testing for all of us as a group. The trip had been full of adventures and uncovering so many hidden facts about the project that we could use, but all in all, the trip was an unbelievable experience, and one that we all took valuable lessons from.
When we did find the British Muslim graves within Bayeux Cemetery, we realised that they weren't just by themselves or under a tree or something, or separated from all the other graves. They were part of the graves, they were right in the middle, and it kind of gives us a sense of community that these people fought for their country with other people that weren't Muslim, and it shows that we were part of their community back then. We were all together, we were all one back then, and why should it be different now in modern times?
It makes me feel very proud that my grandfather Nanaji was part of the British Empire, and the kind of the amount of contribution he put in there to protect the freedoms and rights of the British Empire across the globe.
You have to remember that so many nations played their part. I mean, for example, my own grandfather had a high position in the army, and for me to know that growing up gave me so much pride and a sense of belonging. It gave me that, you know what, I've not just come over here. All the stories that you get in the media about scaremongering and all the black and minority ethnic communities coming to this country to scrounge, we've not. We come here, we play our part, we work really hard, and we commit to the community and the society and to Great Britain, and we will fulfil those roles at every level.
These men and indeed women who came over to Britain, they weren't just simply economic migrants who had no past and no connection to this country. They were clearly military connections.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, what have Muslims ever done for us? Well, actually, we helped you create the nation.
Okay, we're here in Manchester, St. Peter's Square on Remembrance Sunday. 2016. It's a remembrance service that takes place on the second Sunday of every November, and it's here a service that remembers the Muslim soldiers, the non-Muslim soldiers, the Commonwealth soldiers, all the soldiers that passed away and gave their lives for our freedom, really. And it feels right to be here. You know, it's after all the stories, all the travels, all the amazing kind of information that we uncovered, I only wish I could do more. And when I think back about the 15-year-old boys that left the Punjab never to return again, I think it's really important that the forgotten soldiers are never forgotten again.